resilience lens, I have to say, to look at issues across the food system, which means we need a holistic approach to development interventions. Yet it is important, of course, to bear in mind that people are at the foundation of any system, and building the capacity of a system means building the capacity of the individuals within the system. Going back now to the agricultural productivity issues that Chris raised earlier, I can agree with him more on what he said regarding the technology constraints. So it's really important to invest heavily in agricultural productivity, which remains, of course, a key factor when we talk about African agriculture. A very recent publication from IFPRI, just a few months ago, on a book on agricultural productivity in Africa, highlighted a few important findings. First of all, agricultural productivity in Africa has increased at a moderate rate over time, but there is variation in the rate of growth in land productivity, labor productivity, reflected on investment in new seed varieties and mechanization. Furthermore, large incremental expenditure and investment in agriculture will be required to raise and maintain a high level of agricultural productivity in Africa. And also investment in agricultural R&D and research and development is very low and needs to be enhanced. We need to reflect further on why this is the case, what the donor community can do to enhance, I would say substantially, research and development in Africa. One of the questions, and I stop here, one of the key questions that I received to reflect on in connection with this particular plenary was on possible success stories, good examples of technologies that have been used in Africa recently or currently being used in order to increase productivity without harming the environment. So I would like to give you 2-3 examples, and then I conclude. One very good example is the urea deep placement technology, which is an innovative fertilizer application technology that plays a very important role of increasing yield and farm income. The use of this particular technology in field trials in Nigeria in 2013 has resulted in increased rice yields by between 18 to 30%, while reducing at the same time fertilizer use by 18% in most locations in Africa, compared with a traditional fertilizer broadcasting method. This is a method that has been developed by IFDC, and its introduction in Africa began only in 2009, relatively recently, I have to say, with very significant positive results so far recorded in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and also in Nigeria. Another good example is the rice advice tool developed by the International Rice Research Institute, Ebony, Kebbi, and Niger states. So these are some good examples, not necessarily success stories, if you like, but
this, just to give us a 2 minutes reflection on what has been said. Gigi, he talked this morning, we have heard about him, and Ben is here. I just want to give them the floor. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, and then we go back to the presenters, but just, you don't need to go on it, but.
Culture in the north, because it was arid that time. The bulk of the south didn't have irrigation. And as I was coming, even we drove over River Niger. We drove over a number of across in the car with me. I said, look at this water that defined the structure of Nigeria.
So without much, I will Chris and all the way down, each 1 minute.
So let me make 4 very quick points. First, stations that one example on water, I left water out a bit because I knew Tim was going to cover it, but water, solar-powered drip irrigation is increasingly viable, especially in the drier, semi-arid and arid lands of Africa, where there is physical water availability, but not economically viable water availability under old solar technology, is changing quickly. We economists need to get out doing some good impact evaluation of that work, but that's a viable area for real intervention. A second area of innovation, and this speaks to the last comment, financing. There's a gap in financing between microfinance, which is really intended for very small scale.
Low quality, low productivity. You have to work with them and you connect. There are different systems, there are different methods, but that's the way. You cannot see, high profitable business, private company, large corporation, and small guys. You have to link them and to reduce the gap in the supply chain. These are types of solutions that I think would make agriculture more sustainable and resilience in Africa. That means people want to stay, want to work in the farm if they're given an opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the previous panelists captured many of the issues raised, including some issues raised in the questions earlier. Just 2 points from my side in the interest of time. One is about the key challenge that the international community is facing right now, namely the need to feed 2.4 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa by the middle of the current century. 2.4 billion people. This is the challenge. We don't have to discuss now details on what it takes, how we can do that. I'm sure over the next couple of days we can reflect on that, but this is a huge challenge, which takes me to the second point. At least to me, what is really important is the need for a grand design when we talk about agricultural transformation, because certainly I guess everyone agrees in this room that agricultural reform and transformation cannot wait any further. The international community needs to act quickly and it needs to act now. So I'm very pleased to see all these important initiatives emanating from the international development community in the last, I would say, few years and months, including, of course, the very impressive agenda of President Adesina, with whom I had the pleasure and the honor of working closely together while he was the Minister of Agriculture here in Nigeria a couple of years ago. So I think this is a very important direction to take. And let me give you an example. What happened with the Millennium Development Goals a few years back? I guess in an ex-post assessment, many of us would agree, if not all of us, that certainly we could do better with the Millennium Development Goals. The reasons we partially failed with the Millennium Development Goals, I have to say, is because we ignore the interlinkages among the goals. And this is exactly what I mean by grand design. You cannot transform agriculture without substantial improvements in energy, in infrastructure, investment in human capital, in education, the industrialization process, and the overall integration process. And that's why I believe that the fives of the African Development Bank is moving to the right direction, because it takes into account this particular need for a grand design when we talk about agricultural transformation in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, George, you may turn off the mic, and I think we have reached to the end of this plenary session. Before we leave, if you don't mind, give me 1 minute because I haven't said much. So this 1 minute, I want to use it to what was supposed to be a lunchtime presentation between me and Chris about advertising something very interesting to the community here. I don't know how many of you know, but we have what we call structural transformation in African agriculture and rural spaces, and the name is called STARS. It's coined by Chris way back 2 years ago. We sat together in a small hotel room and discussed about the future of building a network of institutions, but also that extends to researchers in agriculture. And we felt there is a huge gap, and as a result, we put together institutions, the African Development Bank, the African Economic Research Consortium, Poverty and Economic Policy, PEP, both based in Nairobi. The World Bank and Cornell organized a small conference. From our side, the research department and our agricultural department colleagues here collaborated, and the outcome was, I think, excellent. Almost a small AEC, you can call it. Now the second phase is coming up, and we would like to invite all of you, researchers, to visit the STARS website. If you hit STARS, you will be led to a website. We will be providing visiting fellowship to Cornell University for promising researchers in the area. And your papers will be published in hopefully lead development journals. The ones that had taken place in Addis Ababa in December are being now processed in water development and agricultural economics. But most of all, also our interest is to step up the game and hopefully engage the policy community and the decision-making bodies. And we are extending also invitations to join this group. Hopefully, IFPRI will join at some point. Who knows, IFAD, because we have seen some interest. And then my own partners who are sitting here in the table, UNECA and UNDP. But generally, I just want to let you know that the agriculture issue will not be limited to the African Economic Conference. It has a very strong home in what we call STARS, and thank you for your hearing. We go to the breakout sessions. There are 5 of them, and please, especially older people like me, go and support the young people who are presenting their papers. I wish you a good afternoon. And then at 6 o'clock, there is a presentation of an excellent report by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. We have to support them. Since we are here, every event, please try to attend. I know Abuja is attractive. There is an urge to go out and see the place, but please at least keep that for another day. One minute, please. There is coffee before the breakout session. So you can have, hello, you can have coffee and some pastries outside.